The first punch came out of nowhere. 16-year-old Ethan Collins felt the knuckles connect with his cheekbone before he even registered that James Mercer, his best friend since third grade, had swung at him. The school parking lot spun around him as he stumbled backward, his backpack sliding off his shoulder and hitting the pavement with a thud. "What the hell, James?" Ethan touched his face, wincing at the sharp pain blooming under his fingertips. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the growing crowd of students. School had just let out, and what had started as a heated argument was quickly becoming the afternoon's entertainment. "You know what you did," James said, his voice shaking with rage. His hands were balled into fists at his sides, his knuckles already reddening from the impact. Ethan straightened up, adrenaline surging through his veins. He couldn't back down now, not with everyone watching, not when James had just humiliated him in front of half the junior class. The tension that had been building between them for weeks had finally erupted, and there was no turning back. "If you've got something to say to me," Ethan challenged, stepping forward, "say it to my face instead of posting that garbage online." James lunged again. 3 weeks earlier, life had been entirely different. Ethan and James had been inseparable since elementary school, playing on the same basketball team, sharing inside jokes that no one else understood, spending countless weekends gaming in James's basement or shooting hoops in Ethan's driveway. Their friendship had weathered the typical middle school drama and seemed destined to carry them through high school unscathed. That changed when Kaylee Martinez transferred to Westlake High. Beautiful, outgoing, and effortlessly cool, she quickly became the center of attention. When she ended up in Ethan's chemistry class and asked to be lab partners, he couldn't believe his luck. "She's way out of your league, man," James had joked when Ethan mentioned her at lunch. "But I'll be your wingman." What started as harmless ribbing between friends shifted subtly when Kaylee began joining them at lunch. James told increasingly embarrassing stories about Ethan, laughing a little too hard at his friend's discomfort. Ethan noticed James texting Kaylee when he thought no one was looking. "It's nothing," James insisted when confronted. "We're just friends." But the dynamic had changed. Their three-way conversations grew strained, with James interrupting whenever Ethan spoke to Kaylee. Ethan started finding reasons to stay after chemistry class, enjoying the moments alone with her, away from James's watchful eyes. The breaking point came when Kaylee invited Ethan, not James, to her birthday party. That night, amid the music and laughter of Kaylee's basement, she pulled Ethan aside and kissed him beneath the soft glow of string lights. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," she whispered. The next morning, James wasn't answering his texts. By Monday, rumors were swirling around school that Ethan had betrayed his best friend, pursuing Kaylee behind James's back. James had posted vague but pointed comments online, comments that quickly garnered sympathy reactions and painted Ethan as disloyal. "You knew I liked her," James finally confronted him by the lockers, voice low, "and you went after her anyway." "You never said anything," Ethan protested. "Not once." James had walked away, shoulders rigid. For 2 weeks they existed in parallel, Former best friends now navigating the hallways like strangers, surrounded by whispers and taking sides. Ethan tried to explain to mutual friends, but James's narrative had already taken hold. Even Kaylee seemed distant, uncomfortable with the drama surrounding their budding relationship. Ethan's parents noticed his withdrawal at home, the way he pushed food around his plate at dinner and disappeared into his room immediately after. "Is everything okay with James?" his mother asked one evening. "You two haven't been hanging out lately." "It's fine," Ethan had mumbled, not wanting to burden them with what felt like childish drama. His father, absorbed in work emails, had simply nodded and moved on. Their busy lives, his mother's hospital shifts, his father's corporate deadlines, left little space for teenage social dynamics that seemed minor in comparison to mortgage payments and career advancement. If only they had pressed harder. Now in the school parking lot, James came at him again. This time, Ethan was ready. He blocked the punch and shoved James back, harder than he intended. James stumbled, regained his footing, and charged. They collided in a tangle of limbs, years of friendship dissolving into raw anger. Ethan felt a sharp pain as James's elbow connected with his ribs. He retaliated with a wild swing that glanced off James's shoulder. "Fight! Fight!" The chant rose from the circle of students, their phones raised to capture every moment of the spectacle. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Ethan knew this was wrong. This wasn't who they were. But pride and hurt and the weight of watching eyes pushed rational thought aside. Each blow exchanged carried unspoken accusations, betrayal, jealousy, miscommunication. "Stop it, both of you!" Kaylee's voice cut through the noise, but neither boy acknowledged her. James tackled Ethan to the ground. They rolled across the pavement, uniforms torn, knuckles bloody. When they hit the curb, Ethan's head snapped back, connecting with concrete. Pain exploded behind his eyes, but adrenaline kept him fighting. He managed to push James off and scramble to his feet, swaying slightly as his vision blurred at the edges. James was already up, chest heaving. "You were my best friend," James spat, blood trickling from his split lip. "Then why didn't you just talk to me?" Ethan countered, his voice breaking. Before James could answer, a teacher's whistle pierced the air. The crowd scattered like startled birds, leaving the two boys exposed in the aftermath of their collision. 3 days of suspension gave Ethan plenty of time to replay the fight in his mind. His parents had been shocked. Their quiet, responsible son involved in a parking lot brawl? The disappointment in his mother's eyes as the principal recounted the incident hurt worse than his bruised ribs and throbbing head. His father had lectured him all the way home. "Violence solves nothing, Ethan. We raised you better than this." What they didn't understand, what Ethan couldn't fully articulate, was how quickly things had spiraled, how a misunderstanding between friends had festered in silence until it exploded, how social pressure and pride had built a wall where there should have been conversation. His phone remained silent except for Kaylee's occasional text checking in. She'd broken things off the day after the fight, unable to handle being at the center of such chaos. James hadn't reached out at all. On the 4th day, Ethan woke with a splitting headache. The dizziness that had plagued him since hitting his head on the curb had worsened overnight. When he tried to stand, the room tilted violently, and he collapsed back onto his bed. His vision doubled, then blurred. "Mom?" he called weakly, his voice barely audible. The house remained quiet, both parents already at work, assuming their suspended son would sleep late. Ethan fumbled for his phone, dropping it twice before managing to dial 911. The operator's voice sounded distant, underwater. He tried to explain about the fight, about hitting his head, but the words wouldn't form properly. "Address?" he finally managed, giving his location before the phone slipped from his fingers. By the time the ambulance arrived, Ethan was unconscious. By the time his frantic parents reached the hospital, the doctors had diagnosed a subdural hematoma. Bleeding in his brain from the impact during the fight worsened by days without treatment. By the time James arrived at the hospital, tear-streaked and escorted by his equally devastated parents, it was too late for the apology he'd finally worked up the courage to deliver. The funeral was held on a Tuesday. The entire junior class attended, shell-shocked by the sudden absence of a classmate. James sat in the front row beside Ethan's parents, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In the days and weeks that followed, the story of two best friends destroyed by miscommunication and pride spread through the community. Parents held their teenagers closer, initiated difficult conversations about conflict resolution, watched more carefully for signs of trouble. At Westlake High, grief counselors helped students process not just the loss of Ethan, but the realization of how quickly ordinary teenage conflicts could turn catastrophic. A memorial bench was placed in the courtyard, bearing a plaque with words chosen by James. "Speak your truth. Listen with your heart. Some words can't be taken back." For James, the weight of unspoken words would be a lifelong burden. The "I am sorry" that came too late, the conversation they should have had instead of throwing punches, the friendship that could have been salvaged if either of them had simply broken through the wall of pride. For Ethan's parents, there would always be the haunting what-ifs. What if they had noticed the tension sooner? What if they had taken his withdrawal more seriously? What if they had checked on him that morning instead of assuming he was just sleeping in? At the 1-month memorial service, Ethan's father addressed the gathered parents, his voice steady despite his grief. "We thought we knew our son. We thought teenage fights were just part of growing up. We didn't realize that behind the slammed doors and one-word answers, there was a storm brewing. We didn't ask the right questions. We didn't create the space for him to tell us what was really happening." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, parents holding their children close, teenagers wiping away tears. "Don't make our mistake. Don't assume they'll work it out. Don't wait for them to come to you. And please teach them that no friendship, no relationship, no moment of pride is worth risking their future over." In the back row, James sat with his parents, a journal open on his lap. Inside were all the words he should have said to Ethan, the feelings he had been too proud to express, the friendship too precious to have lost. Too late, he had learned the most important lesson: that words unspoken can be just as dangerous as blows exchanged, and some damages can never be undone.